So we finished light. So light is one of the factors that affect plants, right? Now you know, I mean, there are a lot of other things about light you'll probably hear from other faculty later on, but what I told you is totally related to greenhouse production. What you need to know, basics about light for greenhouses, and what are the different types of artificial lights, how you can select one versus the other, so kind of applied stuff there, okay. We'll do the same way for the temperature too, all right. Temperature is another factor, very, very important factor that affects plants. Again, keep in mind, in greenhouses, you are trying to control the environment. You want to produce year round, and in order to produce year round, you have to probably provide light, you have to control temperature, you have to control nutrients to supply to plant, you have to control water. So you're learning about how to control all those things, right? So now we talk about temperature, okay? So my focus will be on this particular, there are two chapters. One is related to cooling greenhouses, okay, which is much more important to you in this region. And then I also have a smaller chapter on heating greenhouses, okay. In some cooler parts, you will have to heat the greenhouses some time of the year. Maybe even here too, when if it is freezing outside, you can't grow crops inside the greenhouse without adding some heat. So maybe that is also useful to you, but I'll spend more time on cooling greenhouses, okay. So I have a generalized sort of like a model here, okay. This shows how temperature affects plant growth, okay. Let's start from the optimum. What is the optimum temperature for plants? 20 to 25 degrees Celsius. So when I say optimum, again, this is generalized. 90% of the crops fall into this. There are some special crops here and there whose optimum may be completely different, okay. But most of the crops, the optimal value for temperature is between 20 to 25 degrees Celsius. Keep that number in mind. This is for growth. This is also for germination, okay. Now, let's see what happens if you go from optimum to higher temperatures, this side. When the temperature increases from 25 to 30 degrees Celsius in the greenhouse, in that 5 degrees Celsius range, what you normally see is excessive growth. Well, wouldn't be excessive growth good? I mean, they are growing more, right? No, it is not good. I'll show you some pictures. When these plants grow excessively, you're losing the quality there. They are too lanky, too tall, weak, too much of petioles, elongation, things like that. Not good at all, okay? But then if the heat goes above 30 degrees Celsius, you start seeing the heat damage. And I'll show some examples of what that heat damage looks like. But I want you to remember this, this picture, this temperature model here, okay? 20 to 25 is what you want to maintain in a greenhouse. Throughout the year, if you want to produce crops throughout the year. On the other hand, sometimes it can get cooler outside. The greenhouse can be cooler, and if the temperatures are below 20, here you see excessive growth when the temperatures are higher than 25. If it is below 20, you see the growth is slowing down. Completely opposite response. And when the temperature further goes below 10 degrees Celsius, growth stops. Plants don't grow at all. I'm not telling you that they will die. I'm telling you that growth stops. If it goes below that, close to freezing, like 5 degrees, 4 degrees Celsius, that's where that cold damage may be there. That may result in death of the plants too. Okay? You see the model now? This is kind of like generalized thing I want you to remember. The opposite. Okay. So this is what I want you to remember as just a general rule of thumb. You want 20 to 25 degrees Celsius. All right? Okay?
Sir, is this like only applicable for the greenhouse, or naturally crops also get heat damage above 30 degrees centigrade?
Mostly applicable, it's applicable outside too. This is the general temperature regime.
Most of the crops we are consuming in India are heat damage crops.
I'm sorry?
Because 30-35 is like normal here.
Yeah. What I'm saying is when you are in this range, maybe you're growing crops that are tolerant to that, right? Again, you may have 30 degrees Celsius, but you have nice winds outside that may kind of help in taking away the heat from the plants. The other way plants try to take care of the heat is by transpiring more. So if you're outside, the humidity is less, so they're transpiring, they're cooling the surfaces. But again, keep in mind, this is the general model for temperatures. You may be able to grow crops, you may be able to get some yield, but if you're growing the same crop at 20 to 25, you may get higher yields. That's all it means. So I was, the other day in January, I was in one of the South American countries. I'm sorry, Central American countries, El Salvador, and they grow tomatoes on the plains and also on the hills. And they told me that almost always the yields for tomatoes on the hills much higher than what they're getting in the plains. And the reason is this: they can easily maintain, they can see this temperature in the hills, whereas this is where the plains are. Okay. Now, if it is outside, like you bring up, you can't do much, right? What can you do if the temperature goes up? But if it is a greenhouse, you can do something. So that is where this becomes important. And I'm going to tell you how you control the temperature in this lecture, but that is the power you get in a greenhouse. I can now bring the temperatures, my outside temperature is here, I'm going to do something and bring it to here, so I get more high quality and higher yields in a greenhouse. By the way, what we commonly see in a greenhouse is that if let's take the example of tomatoes. If you're growing tomatoes in the field, about 30 to 35% of the crop, the quality is less. Sometimes you even throw it away because of the heat stress, drought stress, pest problem, things like that. The harvestable product is probably going to be around 65% of the total crop you get. But in greenhouse tomatoes, we can harvest up to 90% because the plants are less stressed. You manage the environment. Okay, that's another big advantage. You can produce more. You can also get a higher harvestable crop. Okay? But again, keep this as a rule of thumb. This is what the plants like. You can't do much outside because nothing is in your control, but you can do something in a greenhouse. Maybe bring it. Maybe you're growing in this range, and maybe you can bring it closer to this range. Yeah.
But sir, this is subjected to the weather also. Na? For example, in the summer or winter season we are cultivating, this temperature might vary a little bit left and right both. For example, for the Kharif season crops or the summer crops that we grow in June, around June or May, June, July 1, the excessive temperature, they can tolerate a higher range of temperature in comparison to the winter season crops. So this might also can work.
I think
Depend on
what
the crop and crop stages and the time of.
yeah. Like I said, this is a generalized model. If somebody asks you what is the optimum temperature for a crop, the best temperature is in this range. They do very well here. It can change, plants acclimate, they change their metabolism. A lot of things happen when you expose plants. They are not static. They're very plastic. They try to acclimate to the changing environment. But all of those acclimation factors have a trade-off. When you grow the plants at this temperature, you get the highest yields. That's all I'm trying to say. Okay, this is the best. The word optimum is important here. This is the best temperature. If you can manage that, you get the highest yields in most of the crops. Thank you. Of course, it's not easy. It's not easy in the field, and it's also sometimes not easy in a greenhouse to do that. When it is like 100 degrees outside, 100 degrees Fahrenheit or for 35 degrees Celsius, whatever that is outside, if you want to maintain 20 degrees or 25 degrees inside, it takes a lot of cooling. And therefore, you need a really good cooling system, right? So you may not be able to maintain that. What I'm trying to convey to you is that this is how plants respond in general. This is their behavior, their physiology. They like this. This is the best temperatures. Okay, that's all I want you to take from this slide. Okay, don't too much interpret at this stage. Okay.
So this is applicable to all parts of the plant, for example, root zone, leaves. So sometimes
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
root zone might have different.
Yeah, and it's a good question. I will give you an example. It's a very kind of special scenario. In regions where I do research, it's a very cold region. Okay, winters are very cold, and so during winters we heat the greenhouses. Okay, so I'm growing a crop like lettuce or spinach, leafy greens. Okay, they're small plants, and you're heating the entire greenhouse. Okay, the plant is just a small, occupying a small volume, whereas you're heating entire, so it costs us a lot. So we've been thinking of all the time, how can we reduce our heating costs? So we did a research where what we did was we maintained the greenhouse air cooler, like about 55 degrees Fahrenheit. So that's close to 12 degrees Celsius. See, it's not this, it's 12 degrees Celsius in this range. Okay, we maintained the air cooler, but we sent, so it's hydroponic crop production. So we sent warm water to the root system. The water temperature was in this range. So the air was in this range, the water was in this range, and the crop was just same as what we get when we actually maintain air at this temperature. So yes, for root zone also, it did help. So I think a couple of things happened there. While maintaining this temperature in the root zone, the root growth was optimum. Roots were growing well, they're respiring and growing well, so the nutrient uptake was optimized. But then also in hydroponics, when we were maintaining 20 to 25 in the root zone, that warm air kind of maintained slightly warmer temperature in the crop microclimate, not the entire greenhouse, but just that microclimate of the crop. You may have seen a slightly warmer temperatures. So when you maintain root zone, you're not isolating the temperature to just the root zone. The heat will slowly escape into the surrounding microclimate too. So that is also possible. So there are some effects of both. We can't separate those two, but there was a clear benefit when we maintained roots at this and the air at this temperature in the greenhouse. We got the same yield as maintaining optimum temperature for the entire greenhouse. But the biggest advantage we got was because the air was at cooler temperature, our heating cost went down significantly. The water volume was less, the water was sent through some closed systems, so we were able to hold the heat longer inside the water, and so the cost went down for us. But going back to your question, is that ideal for root zone temperature too? Yeah, for the root zone, we saw this for the germination of seedlings too. We tried to germinate seedlings at 10, 15, 20 all the way. But I'll show some examples on the next slide. But these are good questions. Temperature is a very, very important aspect, okay? I think if I don't mention this next slide, I will talk about it, but let me see. Well, before we get here, I want to talk a little bit more. So how does light affect plant growth? We talked about light, right? So can you tell me why is light important? I think we asked this question before. Light is important for photosynthesis. Photosynthesis is related to growth, right? We get it. But temperature is slightly different. Temperature also affects growth, but temperature affects one more thing. It's called development. So growth, development, two different things. How do you differentiate growth and development, right? Growth is increase in size, simple. Today the plant is 4 feet tall, 10 days later the plant is 5 feet tall, it increased in size. Increase in size is growth, simple. But with the development, it is change in the stage, a phase. The plant is of the same growth, but this plant is at a vegetative stage, maybe this plant is at flowering stage. That is influenced by temperature. So temperature influences both growth and development. Development is not increase in size, is a change in the state or phase of the plant. You want more flowers, you want early flowers, you want less flowers, you play with temperature. I'll give you an example. In the United States and also in many Western countries, Easter is a very famous festival. You know Easter? Before Good Friday or after Good Friday, you get Easter, right? And in many Western countries, whenever you have the festivals like Easter, Christmas, you celebrate with plants. You give plants as gifts. For Christmas, they give poinsettias. I showed you a picture of poinsettias, red bracts, right? This is Christmas. For Easter, we have something called Easter lilies. There are Easter lilies. These are like lily flowers, big lily flowers. They're potted plants, white color flowers, Easter lilies. Very, very popular for Easter. That's why they call Easter lilies. The important thing is, there is no market for Easter lilies after Easter. If you produce these pots, these flowers after Easter festival, nobody is going to buy them. But you have to bring these potted flowers into the market 2 weeks before Easter for them to be sold or for them to be bought by people, because they buy them and they give them to others. So you got a tiny window, 2 weeks. You have to make sure that your product is in the market 2 weeks before Easter. Okay. So you know what they do. If you go to places like California, where there are a lot of greenhouses, they produce hundreds and thousands of Easter plants. It's a big investment in greenhouses. And what they do is, in Easter lilies, we know that there are certain number of nodes. So each node has a leaf, right? So certain number of leaves should unfold, open up before the flower comes out. Okay, very simple. There are, let's say, 22 nodes. So 22 leaves should open up, then you get the flower. So what these people, greenhouse growers do, they go to the plants. So they know that they have that 2 week window. They have to bring the plants before 2 weeks. So 2 or 3 months before, when they start to cut up, they go to some random plants, they cut the plants and they count the nodes with a sort of like a magnifying glass. And they know that if each node takes 2 days to throw a leaf, and if there are 10 more nodes, they know that it's 20 more days before the flower comes up, right? So there are, let's say, 20 nodes, and each node has a leaf, and for the leaf to open it, let's say it takes 2 or 3 days. So approximately 20 times 2, 40 days. They know that number now, approximately. And then they back calculate to that day. Oh, it's 40 days within the range, or we're too late or too early. If they are too late, you know what they do? They increase the temperature of the greenhouse. When they increase the temperature, the leaf unfolding becomes faster. Instead of 2 days, the leaves start coming up in 1 day. Developmental shift. So they will match the flower inflorescence to come out of the plants to just the 2 week window by manipulating temperature. This is how useful it is in floriculture production. If you give plants cooler temperature, they don't flower. The flowering time is increased in some species. If you give warm temperature, you may get faster flowering. You can play with all economical things like in floriculture industry with temperature. Temperature is so critical and important. Okay, developmental shifts. Okay, just so you know. So here are some examples of different crops and how temperature affects them, and we'll go with one picture at a time. So here is lettuce crop, and this is actually one of my greenhouses. One of my master students, a couple of years back, he was working with lettuce, and this is summer for us, and the temperatures went close to 30 degrees Celsius. It was a greenhouse. We couldn't manage because it was too hot outside. We were only able to get by 5 degrees Celsius lower. And so what happens? This is excessive growth. This is excessive growth. And you may see this plant as a big plant, but quality-wise, it's a very poor quality plant. The petioles have elongated. Remember that lettuce plant I've shown you, nice, compact plant. Compare that with this one. It's all lush growth, and nobody's going to buy it. Quality is yellow color, leaves, things like that. That's example of excessive growth with higher temperatures. Can anybody identify this plant? What is this? Red salvias, right? You see the effect of that. 24 degrees, 27, 32, and 38 degrees, and see what's happening there, right? Yes, you're right. You have temperatures like this outside, but that's what happens to salvias. You get a lot of growth at 24 compared to 28. Abortion of the flowers, plant size is decreased, growth and development both are affected there, right? Size is smaller, the number of flowers are much more compared to here. And when you get close to 40 degrees, the leaves are also senescing and dropping, right? Look at strawberries. This is the optimum temperature for strawberries. 55 degrees at 10, 12 degrees at night, 20 degrees during the day. But you bring it to 30 degrees, what's happening to strawberry fruit? Become smaller, shriveled, not good quality, just like this one, right? This is what you see because of the high temperatures, right? And look at tomatoes too. Tomatoes known to be, heat tolerant, right? But you see bruising, damages in tomatoes at really high temperatures. See that what we call, you see the fruits, on the fruit there will be cracks. I mean, it's not a nice smooth fruit. You'll see cracking on the fruit. The cracking is because of temperature, excess growth, and not proper filling of the fruit. Fruit filling is not there, but it's growing rapidly, so it cracks. Drought also causes that fruit cracking. Sometimes, you see this bruising and sort of like, fluid areas. That's all because of the excess heat. So temperature has a big role on growth, quality, development, and everything. Just as an example to show you, it affects all species, not just flowers, not just fruit, everything. Okay. Like we talked about DLI. What is DLI? Anybody remembers DLI? Right, for the light. There is a term like that for temperature too, and that is called MDT, mean daily temperature. The reason why I said DLI is that plants respond to DLI, not to instantaneous light intensity, like every second. No, plants respond to DLI. Likewise, plants also responds to MDT, not like 10 minutes of warm temperature then followed by 10 minutes of cool temperature. No, they don't respond to those things. They make changes to their metabolism, to their growth, and to their development based on that MDT, mean daily temperature. Okay, so what is mean daily temperature? It's the day temperature, and I got several cases here, but you see in all these cases, what is the mean daily temperature? Same. But see here, I'm sorry, I'm putting in Fahrenheit because in the United States we use Fahrenheit, miles and things like that, pounds, whereas in India it's all Celsius, kilometers and kilograms, right? So, but this was probably a slide I made for greenhouse growers in the United States. So, but again, 59 degrees Fahrenheit, you can convert it whatever you want. But you see that the same temperature in all these three cases, but look at here, it's got a 70-degree Fahrenheit during day for 12 hours and 48 at night. And so mean daily temperature is 70 plus 48 by 2, 59. The second scenario, you got 65 day 12 hours and 53 night 12 hours. Again, it's 59. It's the mean temperature. What is during the day or what is the night, it doesn't matter. It's the mean temperature. Okay. And in this case, the third case is 70 degrees for 14 hours and 44 for 10 hours. Still, you get the same mean daily temperature. So plants are responding to that number, not to this number or much to this number, not to the daytime or the nighttime. Of course, there are some species that do that. They're very, very sensitive to nighttime temperatures or daytime. But in general, plant response is to that average there. Okay? So I want you to remember that. What the mean daily temperature means and how that affects plants. Okay? I may have a slide after this. Yeah, you can see here. There's another term after the mean daily term I want you to remember. It's called base temperature. This is the temperature at which the growth stops. Remember I told you there's a temperature at which growth will stop. And here are some species. These are all floricultural crops, and you can see that is the temperature. 36 degrees is pretty close to 0 degrees, or maybe 1 or 2 degrees Celsius. Okay, but this is a different temperatures at which the species growth completely stops. Okay, and I think you may have heard about the term called growing degree units or growing degree days. That's what they use. That is nothing but that mean daily temperature minus this base temperature. Okay, so let's say the mean daily temperature was 59, right? From the last slide, again example 59, and let's say the base temperature is 36. 59 minus 36 is what? 23. That is the 23 degrees Fahrenheit is what is actually being used for growth. The more that number, the more growth happens. Okay, the growth happens as the difference between mean daily temperature and the base temperature. So you need to know what that base temperature it is. This is the temperature at which the growth will stop. No more growth. Plant growth responds to the mean daily temperature. So the difference between that and this is what is actually being used as growing degree units. Okay, just some concepts about temperature, but we're going to dive into the main part in a few minutes here. But I want you to understand why temperature is important. Temperature is important because it affects two things, not just the growth, but it also affects the development. Okay, there are concepts like mean daily temperature, the base temperature. There is an optimum temperature for plants. You need to know all that information. Right? So here is, I think this is for generalized for India. Okay, I got this information from the web, but you can see the different months on the x-axis. Okay, and temperature in Celsius in the north and southern part of India. Different months doing the different. This is the average temperature. Now this is just an average. It can be much higher than this or it can be much lower than this, but this is the average for the last 20 years or something. Okay, just to use it, and you can see that This is the optimum, isn't it? 20 to 25. I told you that 20 to 25 is the optimum, right? Did I? No, no. So south is higher always. South is higher in summer. Okay. Some of the months in the, you're right, in January, February, you're seeing this. But I know what you're saying. This is what you're confused, right? But I thought too. But this is the data, by the way. This is the 20-year average. And you may be right. And I'm sorry, I don't have a lot of information in this data. But look at this. Whether it is south or not, what I'm trying to point to is that for the majority of the year, right, it's in that 30 to 35 range. That's what I'm trying to convey to you. Okay. That means when I'm saying that 20 to 25 is the optimum and your majority of the temperatures are in the 30 to 35 range, what does that mean? If you have a greenhouse, outside air temperature is always 30 to 35 degrees Celsius. And I'm telling you that you should maintain 20 to 25 inside greenhouse. How do you get to that? You have to cool the greenhouse. Cooling becomes important. The point I'm trying to make from this slide is that based on the data, whatever the source is, there may be a source here, but based on this data, majority of the months, you have to cool the greenhouse under Indian conditions to maintain that 20 to 25 degrees. If you want to get to 25 degrees Celsius, it is simply not possible. The reason is this: if outside is 30 or 35 and you put a greenhouse with a cover on it, inside will be like 40, 45 without cooling. That's called greenhouse effect, right? The light is coming, radiation is coming, and it's not going anywhere, and so it heats up the air inside. So you have to bring the temperature. This is outside temperature, by the way. So what I'm trying to emphasize here is that it appears that under Indian conditions, it's true also for us in many months in the United States we have to cool, but appears that all the way from, I will say, March through October, the outside air temperature is going to be 30 to 35, and if you don't cool your greenhouses, you may not get a quality crop. It is absolutely required to cool the greenhouses. Now, how do you cool is a different question. That's what we'll learn next. But I'm trying to justify, using this data, that cooling greenhouses is important in India. Do you agree to that or not? Right? Based on the data. All right. Yesterday was 90 degrees Celsius outside. I'm sorry, Fahrenheit outside. It was so hot. And if you have a greenhouse that's so, it will be, if you don't cool here, even in this part of the country, it'll be pretty hot inside. So cooling is important. Cooling is absolutely required. Probably if you go up to Kashmir and those areas, maybe you can get away a little bit in summers. But maybe for the majority of the country, cooling becomes important. If you are in a hilly region, maybe you can get away a little bit of it. You get a benefit of that. Right? But for the majority of the plains in the country, it is going to be in the range of 30 to 35 degrees Celsius, and that is going to, which means you're required to cool the greenhouses. Okay? So that's the point here. That's all it is. All right, so now let's understand about how do you cool and what are the basics you need to know about cooling greenhouses and what you can do, which is the best option for you. Okay, I'm going to give you so many options. You can choose. It's always good to choose a couple of options together rather than one. Okay, that's what I'm going to do on this slide. When is we supposed to finish this class? Do you know? It's 9:30, 11:45. 11:35 is the last lecture, and then we have another lecture after that. Right? Okay, we may go a little more than that. We'll probably shuffle a little bit. Okay, because we probably have 6-7 slides more to finish this. So I might take another 15 minutes to finish this. All right. So the first and foremost important thing I want all of you to know is that if you have a greenhouse and it's pretty hot, don't keep just few plants. Fill the greenhouse with plants, because the plant itself is helping you to cool the greenhouse. I'll tell you why. You all know what is transpiration. Anybody who does not know about transpiration? It's okay, please raise your hand. I will explain it. We all know transpiration, right? Everybody knows. What is transpiration then? Why do plants transpire? Okay, you go and tell me. Why do plants transpire? What is transpiration? Anything is fine. Just feel free. We're all one unit, right? Is uptaking water. But any other reason why plants transpire?
Maintain the temperature.
Yeah, the number one reason plants transpire is to cool their surfaces. Why do we sweat? Exactly the same as transpiration. Okay, transpiration is similar to perspiration. Trust. Okay, but you got pretty close. Because of transpiration, you are taking water. Right? The water uptake is happening because of transpiration. So when plants transpire, they are cooling the surfaces. So what is exactly happening? Let's look at the physics of that a little bit. So there is a leaf, okay, leaf surface. There are small pores on the leaf. What are those called? Stomata, right? Tiny, tiny pores. And water from inside is coming to the junction of stomata, still liquid water, right? Still liquid water. It's coming right to that stomata, and that water is gaining the energy from air. It's a pore, right? It's open. So the water molecule now gains the energy from air, uses this energy for state transfer, latent heat. So it becomes from liquid to vapor, not steam, vapor. There's a difference between steam and vapor, okay? And it becomes vapor and then it evaporates. That's transpiration. But what is happening? The water molecule is picking the heat from where? From the air. If your greenhouse is hot, there is a lot of energy in the air. The water molecule is picking up that energy in evaporation process. Let's say now you have a greenhouse with only 10 plants and you have a greenhouse with 1000 plants. All those 1000 plants are transpiring. They are picking the heat from the air and becoming vapor. So those plants are actually lowering the temperature of the greenhouse compared to the group of plants that is just 10 plants here. You see the difference what plants are doing? That's what exactly I mean. They require 970 BTUs to evaporate. Water won't simply evaporate like that. They have to pull a lot of energy from the air. And so keeping the greenhouse filled with plants is one of the best ways to keep the greenhouse cooler. Oh, my greenhouse is hot. I'm not going to add plants. No, you are actually not doing the good job. Okay, that's the number one reason. Okay, all right. I'm going to share you so many other ways you can keep the greenhouse cooler, but this is one of the reasons. All right, does it make sense? Why plants are important? All right, the next one is shade cloth. This is probably what they normally use in India too, right? They put a shade cloth. What does a shade cloth do? When you put a shade cloth, what happens? Why do you put a shade cloth? Radiation won't get through, right? And radiation is the main source of heat. So you are reducing the amount of light that gets into the greenhouse, and in doing so you also reduce the temperature of the air. But there is a problem with this method. What is the problem? The problem is you are lowering the light. Plants need light for growth. So we want to make sure that you use this as the last option, not as the first method. If you can't control the temperature with any other method, go to this method. Put a shade cloth. But when you are putting a shade cloth, try to use a cloth that provides maybe 35 to 40% shade, maximum up to 50% shade. Don't go beyond that. At least allow 50% of the light to get into the greenhouse. Okay? I've seen people putting a shade cloth inside the greenhouse, but the best method is to put the shade cloth actually outside the greenhouse. Okay?
So these shade clothes have some VLT values, the visible light transmission values, which we have to go.
Some of the shade cloths have increased diffusion, the diffusivity rates, but it is all, it's not a big deal there. What is more important is you want to reduce a certain percentage of radiation getting through. But what is important is you can put a shade cloth inside the greenhouse at the top of the greenhouse, but the point right there is already the solar radiation has entered the greenhouse, right? It's already inside the greenhouse and you are trying to just distribute at the top, but rather you would put it outside. That is the most effective way to reduce even that radiation to get inside.
In this image, the intermittent shading is
Right, I'm going to talk about this image in a second. So now what you're seeing here is called, this is an automated shading system. This is inside the greenhouse, it's not outside the greenhouse. And what we do is, the computer systems pull the shade cloth automatically when they are not able to maintain greenhouse temperature. Okay, they roll over, they pull the shade cloth away, and this is very common in majority of the greenhouses in the United States. completely automated. But there are also systems where you roll shade cloth manually and bring it down. You can also do that, okay? But again, this number is important. Try to at least maintain 10 moles per meter square per day, even with a shade cloth. So plants have some light to grow. Or what you can also do is put the shade cloth during the afternoon times when that solar radiation is very high. The reason why I say afternoon is, if you look at generally the plant metabolism, plants grow very well in the morning and maybe a little bit towards the afternoon, but in the middle of the day, like between 12 and 3 p.m., their growth kind of slows down because it's the stressful part of the day. Generally, stomates also close a little bit during that time to conserve water. So you may want to just use that time to, for the shade cloth. But last resort, not the first one. Okay. This may be more important because most of the greenhouses I see in India are naturally ventilated poly houses. Okay. So I want to talk about a little bit. I want you to remember, so tomorrow when you are trying to build a greenhouse or when you are going to provide a recommendation on a greenhouse, there are a few things you want to keep in mind for temperature control. You notice this greenhouse is this, what we call, in the United States, we call this as a high tunnel, okay, or a hoop house. This is nothing but a poly house, simple poly house. You have just a structure and a polyethylene, right? You are describing me just a structure and a polyethylene, that's all we have here. But notice that you have two things here. We have a side vent, you see that side vent here, right there, and then you have a ridge vent, two. So it's kind of clear in this picture, this is the side vent and that's a ridge vent. Hot air, if air gets hot, the hot air is lighter, meaning it raises up. It raises up. Okay, so when the air in the greenhouse gets heated up, that hot air raises up. It's not here. Most of the hot air is up here. Okay, of course there is a gradient there. So the way to get rid of this heat from the greenhouse is by providing ventilation. So you create side vents. So as the wind is blowing, it takes the hot air and pushes it outside, natural ventilation. But also when the wind is blowing, you have a ridge vent up here. The wind hits on this side, it creates sort of like a low pressure on this side, okay, on the leeward side, and that low pressure pulls the air outside. That's the mechanism there for the ridge vent. You see up there the ridge vent opening. So as the wind is blowing like this, the hot air is in here and it creates a low pressure on this side, high pressure on this side. It creates high pressure on this side and low pressure on this side. Because of the low pressure, the hot air comes outside. That's a natural mechanism. Okay. So you need not just the side ventilation, but you should also put ridge ventilation. Two of them, important. But there are certain considerations here, very important. Number one, all of this will work only when there is, if there is no wind, no use. Done, you're done, right? That's number one. You should at least have, I would say, 5 to 10 kilometers per hour wind to get a good, decent control inside. Let's say you have wind, now then you should ask me, then how much this should be, what are the dimensions, what is the length and width of the side ventilation, what is the length and width of that top ventilation. That's very, very important. Whenever you are building a greenhouse and they are saying, oh, we're going to provide you ridge ventilation and side ventilation, then you should ask them what is the area of the ridge ventilation or side ventilation. So here is the rule of thumb. The side ventilation, both sides, this side area and this side area should be 15 to 20% of the area of the greenhouse. So what does that mean? Let's say this greenhouse is 10 meters by 50 meters, okay? 10 by 50, 500 meters square, that greenhouse. I'm telling you that the area of the side ventilation should be at least 15% of that 500, which is 75 meters square, right? You should at least, at a minimum, you should create an area of 75 meters square. So 40 meters square on this side, maybe 40 meters square on that side, okay? And then you can create length and width based on that, but the area is important, 40 meters square, number one rule, okay? The ridge ventilation should be also 15% of the ground area. That's number two rule. And the third thing is the ridge ventilation, it should open at 60-degree angle. See that angle right there, that should be 60 degrees. You don't want it to be open like this, or you don't want it to be too small. You want a 60-degree angle. So if you keep these three things, you are appropriately specifying what you need for natural ventilation. Okay, 15% ground area should be the area of the ridge ventilation or the side ventilation, and the ridge ventilation should be at least 60-degree angle opening when it opens.
What is this? Case receive some good winds, and they can put some like on the by increasing the side winds and put on some windmills nearby so that they can use renewable energy as well. The energy is generated and they get the ventilation aspect as well.
For the windmills, you need a lot more wind velocity than what you generate here. But if you are in a place where there is a lot of winds, this is a very good option, side ventilation. But you also have some problems like the structural problems, right? The greenhouse can be blown away. You will learn about that. But definitely, if you are in an area where there's a lot of winds, the wind energy, capturing that can be useful. You can use that wind energy to generate fans and things like that later on, right? Right, and that's what I'm going to talk next. I don't know why I got here.
Sir, one more question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sir, for the side vent, the proportion of the area on the both side should be equal, or it can vary with it.
It should be equal, left and right. So then it goes to the question, if you are in an area where there is no wind at all, you don't have any other option than creating artificial ventilation. Natural ventilation is through wind and convection. When there is no option, then you have to go only at least for exhaust fans. So when you create an exhaust fan, you put fans on one side and then you put windows on the other side, right? You want to place your fans on the windward side. I'm sorry, the leeward side. So then what is a windward side and what is a leeward side? Okay, the direction from which the wind is coming is the windward side, simple, and the opposite direction is the leeward side. So if you put the fans on the leeward side, the fans are pulling the air, right, hot air from the greenhouse outside, so it is easy for the outside air to come inside. But if it is on that windward side, more air will get into the greenhouse. So make sure that number one, the fans that you put, they are on the leeward side, so they can pull the wind nicely into the greenhouse. That's number one rule. Then the second question is, okay, I have a fan, what is the capacity of the fan? Am I just going to go by whatever the manufacturer tells me, or I am going to actually calculate this capacity that I need for my greenhouse? Yes, you can calculate, and the rule of thumb is this: 10 cubic feet per minute per square feet, 10 CFM per square feet. Okay, again this is in square feet. You can convert into meter square, cubic meters per, but I'll give you an example. Let's say you have a greenhouse 30 feet by 100 feet, okay, 30 by 100. So the area is what? 3000 square feet, 30 by 100, okay. For every square feet, 10 CFM. Now you have what? 3000 square feet area. That means your fan should be 30,000 CFM capacity. Let me repeat one more time. So you have a greenhouse which is 30 feet by 100 feet, 30 by 100. So what is the area? 30 times 100, 3000. That is the area of your greenhouse, number one. What I'm telling you is that the fan capacity should be 10 cubic feet of air should be exhausted every minute by the plant. CFM stands for cubic feet per minute. 10 cubic feet of air should be vented out every minute for a square feet of greenhouse area. But you have 3000 square feet of greenhouse area. So 10 times 3000, 30,000 CFM is the fan capacity. Okay, 30,000 CFM, rule of thumb, very simple calculation. So don't go by somebody saying, oh, just get this one, get that fan. You should really spec it properly. Yeah, one more time, yes. So let's take a greenhouse. What are the dimensions of the greenhouse? 30 feet by 100 feet. So what is the area of the greenhouse? 3000 square feet. What am I giving you? The rule is 10 cubic feet of air should be vented every minute per 1 square feet area of the greenhouse. But your greenhouse is 3000 square feet. So 3000 times 10, 30,000 cubic feet should be. Now what you can do is, oh, this is 30,000 is a big number, so you can buy 2 fans, each with 50,000, 15,000 capacity. Put one fan on this side and another fan on that side, and each is about 15,000. I would always say add another 10% more, because the companies say it is 30,000, you may not get 30,000, right? Efficiencies may be dropping because of the electrical energy, all this. Just to be safe, add another 10% more. In this case, maybe 35,000 CFM. That is the capacity for that greenhouse. And put 2 fans on which side? The leeward side. And then make windows on the openings on the windward side, so when the fans are running, they pull the air into the greenhouse. Okay. Now, this is good. Now you have artificially created the ventilation. So now even there is no wind, you are actually able to exhaust the heat from greenhouse outside. But what are you bringing inside? You are bringing in outside air. But if outside air is hot, you are only bringing hot air into the greenhouse, right? Of course, you are venting air. The greenhouse air is probably hotter. I get it. You are venting it, that's good, but you are not getting cool air inside. If it is hot outside, you are only bringing hot air inside. So that is the problem. Then what do? You go to cooling pads, fan and pad system. Okay. See how we are moving from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4th step, right? It all depends on your location, your situation, your resources. If you are just buying exhaust fans, good, it's cheaper. But now I'm in an area where it's always hot. You got to cool the air. So cooling pads, they work exactly the same way as your air coolers. Remember air coolers? Small boxes in our homes, right? Exactly the same way. See, here is an exhaust fan, 2 fans in a greenhouse, right? And these fans are pulling air. What is that side? That side is what? Leeward side. And you put the pads on? Very important, remember that. Pad should always be done on windward side. Okay? Pads on the windward side. And pads can further help you lower by another 5 to 10 degrees Fahrenheit than outside. Now you are getting cooler air into the greenhouse. Okay? It is not cooling like 20-25 degrees Fahrenheit. It is only giving you a small advantage. Maybe another 10 degrees Fahrenheit lower. But maybe that's better. Maybe that will fit. If you are at 30 degrees, you are bringing it to 20 degrees, that's good. Right? So you get some benefit. But there are a few things I want you to remember. First, I want you to understand how this cooling pad system works. Very simple. What we call evaporative cooling. Same thing is happening in an earthen pot. You have earthen pots in villages, they pour water and cover it with a cloth. The water will be cooler inside. Evaporative cooling. Water is evaporating through the holes of the pot, clay pot, and when it is evaporating, it is cooling. So let me explain what's going on. So I may have a picture. So this is a cooling pad, right? These are cooling pads, okay? And the water is flowing down the cooling pads, all right? Let's go back again to this, right here. So the water is flowing down. So these fans are pulling air, and the air is coming from outside. So the outside air comes in contact with the water that's going down in the pad. Hot air comes in contact with water. Right there, that heat exchange happens. The water is picking up the heat from the air, and when it picks up the heat, just like transpiration, water evaporates. The greenhouse becomes more humid, but cool air enters the greenhouse. The hot air is losing the heat to the water, water is evaporating, but cool air enters the greenhouse. That's the mechanism, evaporative cooling. Same thing is happening those the air coolers, the swamp coolers we use. Okay. Now, this chart I kind of showed you before, but I wanted to explain one more thing. If your greenhouse is located in a generally humid area, this fan and pad system is going to be less efficient. Okay. Now, what did I tell you? The water is flowing down the pads, hot air is coming, and there is an exchange between air and water in terms of temperature. But if the air already has a lot of water, it is already humid, the exchange won't be efficient. You see what's going on here? If the air is very dry and hot, you get the best heat exchange. But if the air is humid and hot, you get some exchange but not a lot. That is very, very important. So this fan and pad system is most efficient in dry and hot areas. Like Rajasthan, I was going to say that. Okay. But here it is hot and humid. In such conditions, you won't get the expected 10 degree Fahrenheit decrease in temperature. You may get 2 or 3 degree Fahrenheit decrease in temperature. And what do you do in these areas? You have to go for air conditioning. Not like this. We run coils. Inside the coils, we send a coolant. There's a cold, liquid going through the coils, and air is blown through those coils. Heat exchange happens, and cool air comes inside. That works, but it's more expensive than fan and pad system. Okay. Now that is exactly what I'm showing you in this graph. Look at this graph. This is what that carrier person came up with. Okay, what we call psychrometric chart. This psychrometric chart will tell us what will be the greenhouse temperature inside the greenhouse for a given outside air temperature and humidity. I want you to look at this number. So let's say outside air is at 80 degrees Fahrenheit. Okay, this line. All right, this line. Outside air is at 80 degrees Fahrenheit, and when outside air is 80 degrees and the humidity is 40%, the inside can be 60 degrees Fahrenheit. Remember that, okay? Number one. But let's say the same air, outside air is at 80, but outside is at 80, but the humidity is 60% now, the inside temperature is going to be 70 degrees, not 60. So it is not just dependent on outside air, it's also dependent on relative humidity. The more humidity, less control of temperature, less reduction in temperature. At 40% humidity, you are able to get 60 degrees Fahrenheit, but at 60% humidity, you are only able to bring the greenhouse to 70 degrees Fahrenheit. That's what the psychrometric chart tells. And this chart is available, is very standardized, and you can actually calculate with some close approximation what the greenhouse temperature will look like. But I want you to remember that. There is one more thing. I think we are getting out of time here, but this probably will be the last slide. This is very, very important. But again, when it comes to, I told you how do you select a fan, exhaust fan capacity. But there are also some rules for selecting pads. You should not simply go by company says, I want to buy 40 square feet of pad. No. There are rules for that too. And I put that in here. By the way, all of you should be getting these slides very soon. Okay, I think they're waiting on some other faculty members' lectures, and they'll give you a packet. But I want you to understand now, okay, and then you'll have this information with you. Okay, so how do you calculate the pad area? Here is an example. Okay, so we'll start with greenhouse area. In this case, the greenhouse has 1,000 square feet area. 1,000 square. You may have a different area, but I'm just going to give you an example. 1,000 square feet. So when you have 1,000 square feet, how much of the air you should exhaust? 10,000, right? Because 10 times 1,000. You got it. Okay, that's 10,000 cubic feet per every minute. Cubic feet per minute. That's what you determine for the fan capacity. So the fan is exhausting that much. That's the first thing you calculate. Then you should know something called air velocity specification. That's a constant. It's a value that you get from manufacturers of these pads. These are cellulose pads. Okay, very, very popular cellulose pads. For cellulose pads, the air velocity specification is 250 feet per minute, meaning it allows air to go to 250 feet in every minute. Okay, that's what it is. So you need to know that information. You get that information from the manufacturer of the pads. You should ask them, okay, I'm buying from you. Give me your product's air velocity specification. If you are buying Aspen, another cellulose is one product, Aspen is another one. For Aspen, it's lower. It's maybe 200 feet per minute. So when you know that, then what you simply do is to determine the area of the pads in the greenhouse, you divide the 10,000, which is the exhaust volume of air, by that air velocity specification. So in this case, 10,000 by 40, 10,000 by 250, you get 40 square feet. That is the area of the pads you should put in your greenhouse. I'll tell you how you get to the dimensions in a second, but let me ask you, is this clear so far, the calculation? If you have doubt, ask me. This is very, very important.
Can you explain the C?
Sure, again. So this air velocity specification is a value that you should get from the manufacturer, the company. In this particular case, air velocity specification is 250 feet per minute for cellulose pads. We are using that as an example. Okay. So you need two pieces of information. One, how much air you should exhaust, number one, and then you need that air velocity specification value from the manufacturer. When you have these two things, the exhaust area is dependent on your greenhouse size. You may have a 1,000 square feet greenhouse, you may have a 10,000 square feet greenhouse. Based on that, you calculate how much air you want to exhaust with the fans. Then this one, you get it from the manufacturer. When you have these two pieces of information, then now you are trying to determine how much pad should I buy, right? And the area of pads that you will buy is given by the volume of air you are venting, in this case 10,000, divided by the air velocity specification. Look at the units. It is cubic feet per minute. Divide that by feet per minute. You get what? Square feet. Right? Minute gets cancelled. Cubic feet by feet is square feet. So you get area. In this case, in this particular example, how much was that? 40 square feet was the area. Okay. Now let's say your greenhouse is 15 feet or 30 feet wide. Well, let's say 20 feet wide. Okay. But I am telling you that you should put 40 square feet area. If your greenhouse is 20 feet wide, what is the height of the pad? And what is the length of the pad? The greenhouse is 20 feet, so that is the length. And the height should be 2 feet. 20 by 2 is 40 square feet. So you first get to the area, and then from that area, you go to your greenhouse width, and the area divided by width is the height of the pads that you should buy. Okay, that's how you do that. But again, 2 feet is too small. Generally, pads are sold at 4 feet tall. Okay, so in this case, the ideal number would be 10 feet long by 4 feet tall. That is how you properly spec the pad area. You understand what I'm saying? So just simply don't go by what manufacturer says. Oh, I got this big, I'm going to put the entire pads. No, you're probably wasting your money. Okay, so you need to know how to spec the fan capacity, and you need to know how to spec for the pad area. From the pad area, you get the dimensions, length and width. Does it make sense to all of you? Very simple calculation, but very, very useful calculation. Okay, and again, keep in mind, there are few considerations here. Keep the pads always on the what side? Right, and the fans always on the leeward side. Okay, if you can't do that, there could be a situation where you can't do that. You have to increase all those capacities by 15%. If you can't put the fans on the the leeward side, you have to increase the fan capacity by 15%, because that's the problem, right? Having it on the leeward side, you get the benefit from the natural wind, but if you're not doing it, you have to increase the capacity. All right, always keep a couple of things. There's a fan here and there's a pad here, right? You don't want the distance should not be more than 100 feet. If it is more than 100 feet, you are creating hot pockets. The air won't be pulled like that. Okay, keep that in mind. All right. And the other thing I want to mention about the pads is the water is running down right through those pads. With time, that water collects all the salts and starts blocking the passages in the pad. So what we normally recommend is bleed off. Throw away 10-15% of the volume of water every week or so. And also you may have to clean the greenhouse. I've seen it again and again. Every month we clean the pads because algae, the green algae, starts growing on the pads and starts blocking the water movement. So you may have to do some maintenance. Okay.
Sir, what there are some places like Udaipur which receive some okay monsoon as well as is not very dry in some months. So if we and there are presence of artificial lakes as well there. So if we get a system where we are pumping the lake water through the radiators in a closed system and putting that back into the lake. So
Why do you want to put it back in the lake?
Sorry.
You can put it to a plants or somewhere else, right? Why do you want to add back to the lake?
Was that water once it is running down through the radiator through the closed system, it will turn hot. So if it gets back into the lake, the system will be a closed loop, but that won't be wasting of water or throwing away, these issues can be resolved with that?
I wouldn't even put it in the lake because it's got all other salts. You're polluting the lake.
No, but it is in a closed radiator loop system like we see nowadays with the coolers. This is not the cellulose layer they are dealing with. There are now closed metal fins through which the water gets back into the system.
Yeah.
So will that those options will be a better investment within a country like India?
Well, first of all, if you are in a place like Udaipur where there's a lot of lakes, I'm expecting that the humidity is going to be higher because water is evaporating from the lakes. We have a very similar situation where I live. Lake Michigan is one of the huge lakes, and we have a huge greenhouse next to the Lake Michigan, and it's a humid area. This system was not effective at all to begin with. There, the greenhouses went for a coil system. I would recommend that for such situations. I know the Rajasthan may be dry area, but if your greenhouse is located next to a big lake, that's a big water body. It's evaporating continuously. So the humidity in that microclimate is going to be higher. It is going to affect it. Now, comparison between a metal fin versus cellulose, I don't know. I haven't done any research on that, but I would prefer a cellulose-based fins because it absorbs the water, holds the water in that pad material for a longer time, whereas a metal fin, water is simply falling down. As the air is passing through, if the pad material is moist, it's absorbing water, then there is a better heat exchange than the metal fins. But I have not done any research to show one better over the other. Just a guess for you. Okay. This is the last slide. Sorry, I'm taking too much time. But this is another method. It's called fogging method. Okay. And this is mostly useful for propagation. It's the same method. It's also an evaporative cooling technique. But what we are doing is we are spraying fine water droplets at the top of the greenhouse using sort of like a sprinkler system. We are not spraying droplets of water. We are spraying fine. The word fine is important. Fine droplets of water. Droplet size should be 50 microns, so tiny. And as these droplets are sprayed into the air, they exchange heat with air. The droplets evaporate, increases the humidity of the air, but the air becomes cool. Because the humidity is higher, it's so good for propagation, cuttings. Why? Because when you're propagating, you cut a stem. It doesn't have any roots. So when it dehydrates, when it loses too much water, it dies. So you want to make sure that those cuttings are always hydrated, and one way to do that is make the air humid. So this system works very well for propagation. Some of you may be interested in just propagating roses, propagating seedlings, rather than producing. For such operations, this is a better way of cooling the greenhouse, just by fogging at the top. Okay, but it's expensive compared to fan and pad system. Also, you have to maintain the foggers. The sprinklers can get clogged with salts and may lose efficiency, so you may want to make sure that you clean them properly. But most important thing is the droplet size. You should not be simply spraying water. If you spray water, you are creating problems, pest problems. You should be spraying fine droplets, micron sized water droplets. Then you get the best cooling. Okay. All right, so these are all the different methods of cooling, starting from plants to shade cloth to natural ventilation to exhaust fans to fan and pad systems. They're all different methods. What to choose is up to you. I would strongly recommend choose at least two methods together, okay, depending on your resources, all right, and to get the effective cooling, all right. But we'll stop here because we're already out of time. It's almost 12 and we have another class right after this, but we'll probably take a break, maybe 10-minute break, and we'll come back, all right. And I'm going to talk about greenhouse heating after this. I'll probably finish that a little faster, but take a 10-minute break.